Oftentimes, objects are used to store values of a similar type, right? And what you do is you give these sort of anonymous objects, but let them have the same parallel structure. In other words, the same key value pairs, the same keys specifically, but with different values to represent the different individuals. Here, let me give you an example. So there was a group back in the 60s called the Beatles, you might have heard of. Um, I'm just going to make some objects that will represent the people in that group. So I'm going to say J gets the object, using this object literal, of first, which will represent the first name, which I'm going to put John, and then last, which would represent the last name, which will be the string Lennon, and then let's put a role, which would be what they played in the band, and I'm going to say lead guitar, and I'm going to give an age. I don't really know what ages they were back then, but I'm going to make a guess about 23 for John, right? And notice in this last one, the first three, the values were all strings. My last example here, it was a number, all right? So within an object, each field or each key value pair can have a different type in its value, okay? The keys are always just labels, basic identifiers, but the values can vary in type. All right, so if I hit enter, you'll see what that object looks like. That's now stored in the variable J. Let me do another one here. I'll put P. This will be the singer Paul McCartney. So in the first field, put Paul. In the second field, or last field, we'll call McCartney. In the role, we'll put bass. And age, we'll put 21. I believe he was the youngest of the group. And notice that I did use the same field names. There's no enforcement of this now. I'm using basically anonymous objects, but I'm just kind of overseeing my own data entry here and making sure they have the same field names. All right, so there he is. Two more, I'll go a little bit faster here. Let's do G, which will be a first name of George, a last name of Harrison, a role of guitar, and an age of 24. There he is, and there's one more, the most talented of the group. R for Ringo. His last name is Starr. Again, keeping a parallel data structure to the other objects. His role was drums. And his age, he was the old one in the group, maybe 29. Okay, so now I have those four objects that I stored in four separate variables. These are just normal data items, so they can be grouped together in another object or in an array or whatever. So here's something you might do, is something like Beatles gets the array J, comma, P, comma, G, comma, R, which would put those four values directly in there, and you can see it's so big that it doesn't fit in one screen, but here's my Beatles object that comes back. It's an array. You can tell by the square brackets, and inside that array we have four objects representing John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Right, and so now we have this Beatles array, and we could say, give me Beatles sub 2. That would be the third one in the group, which is George Harrison, and so it would list that guy individually. Okay, so this is a common way to kind of keep track of data. Okay, and because of this reason, the object, and especially this anonymous type of object here, is often used as a way to pass data back and forth in APIs, right? So some company builds a web service. A good example is Google Maps. You might send objects to Google to say what sort of information you want from the maps, and they might send you objects back to that you can parse and kind of figure out, the answer to your questions, right? What data it's going to send back. Okay, so it's a really good thing to learn about these objects. Okay, so now let me just do a quick example, a little bit larger with this. Let's run through a loop. Now I have this Beatles loop here, or the Beatles array. Let's say for let I get 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus. Nope, it's not going to let me do that in one line. I'm multiple lines here on the console, so I'll have to go ahead and do it. Cram it all into one line. All right, let I get 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus, and then on the same line I'll say console.log Beatles sub I dot. Okay, so Beatles sub I will give me an object. That object, each of those objects has an age, a first, a last, and a role. So I will say, for this one that I'm looking at now, give me the first name plus a space plus the last name. So that'd be Beatles sub I. And let me just say another one here is, I'm going to make this kind of large here, Beatles sub I dot age. All right, and that's going to be the end of my console.log. And I'll end the loop there. Let's see what happens. Okay, John Lennon is 23, Paul McCartney is 21, George Harrison is 24, Ringo Starr is 29. Looks like I went one too far. Oh, it's returning an undefined actually from the for loop itself. So you would not see that if this was in a part of a larger program. Okay, well anyway, that's just a quick look at how you can group objects together and manipulate them in code.